All right. The things I always forget to do, I have done. It'll be
Excellent.
smooth sailing from here on out.
Thank you, Jamie. Welcome everyone to our July uh, Conservation Commission
June,
meeting. Pardon me?
June. It's June.
Oh, see, already somebody said July is next week, and I'm like, that is unreal. So it's already begun to sink in for me. Okay, great. We have a few more days before we hit July. Welcome to our late June Conservation Commission meeting, everyone. And thank you for joining tonight by Zoom. We have the usual folks with us tonight. So as far as I can see, no new guests. So we have a jam-packed agenda, but I'll cover that in a moment. Let's first open with land acknowledgement. Acknowledging and honoring all Indigenous people, the people who came here before us and nurtured this place as stewards of Mother Earth, the first people. I make this acknowledgement aware that this land is unceded and that issues of water and territorial rights and encroachment upon sacred sites are ongoing in the Wabanaki homeland. I acknowledge the Owaskawag people who once lived in what is now Scarborough, and that as we support efforts for land and water protection, we honor the current tribes who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Jamie, I was not present for the last meeting. So could you please call we should get a motion to approve the minutes from this last meeting, which were included with the materials that Jamie sent around.
I'll motion to pass.
I'll second.
Thank you. Excellent. Pete seconds. All right, Jamie.
All right, I shall roll call, and I'm sorry if I forget anyone. Just tell me if I have. All right, Abel,
Present.
Randy,
I'm here.
Oh, here. Sorry.
and we're voting on the minutes also. So you could
Okay,
just
so I'm
say,
here and I abstained from voting because I wasn't at the last meeting.
okay. Pete,
Yes, and approve.
thank you. Marla,
Yes.
Kathleen,
I am here but I was not at the last meeting, so I abstain also.
okay. Jessica,
Yes.
Maggie,
Yes.
okay. I think I got everyone. Let me know if I missed anyone.
Excellent.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. So tonight we've got quite a bit to cover, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for everything. I feel like we're going to be doing a fair amount of discussion on a few of these items. So we'll have an update with the Conservation Open Space Plan and where we are with our environmental standards. We've got planning board submittals to review. We have a response to the Conservation Commission's inquiry, and we have at least one other submission that we want to weigh in on. And then there's a piping plover ordinance in editing currently, so we have a chance to weigh in on that. We'll go through some updates, but Councilor Shoup has brought forward something in particular she wants to discuss with us. And we'll have an update from the Parks and Conservation Land Board around the land bond measure that's coming up, as well as report outs around citizen engagement and education and the Sustainability Committee. Is there anything else that folks feel like you want to discuss tonight, or I may have missed? All right, let's get into it and open with public comment. We do have Andrew with us this evening. And Andrew, if Mackey of the Scarborough Land Trust, Andrew, if you'd like to say anything with us at the top of the meeting.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Good evening, everyone. Can't miss the opportunity to speak. I do just want to mention tomorrow night at the town council meeting, if anyone wants to come out as an individual and support the land bond request to purchase 130 acres off of Hanson Road. Would
Oh,
love
sorry, I
the
think I finally made it in.
Oh, Bennett. Sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
Just would love the support. This is the second and final reading. And the first reading, for the first time, we had a counselor vote against it. So, there is some, whatever you want to call it, in the community. And I think, we need to show what conservation means to everyone in Scarborough and how important it is. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Jessica, could I ask you as chair of PCLB to comment on that, maybe during the PCLB comments, or would you like to say any notes right now?
I was going to mention it in the PCLB update, but just it is a fantastic property. It's the Silverbrook Preserve 2, and it has already received $650,000 worth of funding from Land for Maine's Future, which I think is a wonderful accomplishment. And I want to say during first reading, there were questions related to the land bond and the Silverbrook Preserve 2 application for funding, recommendation for funding. So I think getting folks out to support both would be very important. But I'll talk more about that later. But I just want to highlight it's a wonderful, wonderful property, and it's an opportunity we have the likes of which we haven't seen in a long time.
Thank you. And thank you, Andrew. So moving into old business on conserving land and building resiliency to goals of the commission. We've got an update from about the conservation open space plan. Maggie, would you like to update us along with Jamie on this?
Sure. We had I'm trying to see the date. We had a Zoom meeting with the consultants on the 18th, and we looked at what the data they're gathering on the existing spaces and the existing conditions in the landscape right now. We are planning a public workshop to educate the public on July 25th. I believe it's now 6 to 8. Is that right, Jamie?
Yes.
And it'll be at the public, at the what do they call it? Where the police
Public safety building.
safety. Yes, thank you. And there's a plan for public engagement. I think people are going to be at the concerts in the park, and so trying to get the word out, as well as a digital public engagement. And I think on the town website, the town Facebook page, and hopefully soon. Well, they did show us a very draft plan outline of what the plan will eventually look like. Did I? And that data gathering, I think, is going to continue over the next several months. So that's not just a one and done thing. That's kind of an ongoing thing. So what did I miss, Jamie?
I just want to clarify that. So we are having it's a 2-hour workshop on a Thursday in July. So we'll see how many people attend. We are encouraging every committee that is represented on the ad hoc committee to put in an effort to attend that workshop. Even if we just have our committee members from our representative committees attend, we'll have probably over 100 participants at that event. As Maggie said, we'll have members of the ad hoc committee at 3 of the 6 concerts in the park coming up. So July 11th, 18th, and August 1st. And then we'll also have people at Scarborough Summerfest. And this will all be collecting some information and so people can weigh in on kind of their conservation values that will feed into the overall open space plan. And the smaller events will also direct people to the project website, which will have another opportunity for people to provide feedback. So just in terms of timeline, the ad hoc committee should receive the draft, a link to the draft website tomorrow. I actually got a sneak peek this evening and provided some notes back to our consultants. And the committee will have some time to provide some additional feedback and edits, and then it will be live by the time we are at our first concert in the park on July 11th. And so that website will provide an overview of the process, background information that will be important for people to have, and be an opportunity for people to provide feedback. And the website, the information that's collected through the website will mirror the information that's collected at the workshop. So people can attend one workshop, go to the community event, and or go to the website, and we'll still be collecting the same types of data. So that's kind of where things stand at this point. The goal is to have the plan wrapped up and ready to be presented to the town council in January or February of next year. So it's a pretty quick process now that we're underway.
Thank you, Maggie and Jamie. So Thursday, the 25th of July would be great for as many of us who can attend to be there. It sounds like it's going to be a good meeting.
Yeah, and if it would be helpful, I can send out a calendar invite if that would help people get it on their calendars so that they'll remember. I can do that after the meeting.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Any discussion or questions about where the open space plan is, where it fits with everything else that we're engaged with in town and conservation efforts? Great. Okay, thank you all. And thank you, Maggie, for representing you are representing us, right? That's your role. Excellent, thank you. All right, so environmental standards, that we've moved out of this commission. Jamie, would you like to share where we are with this?
Yeah, and Autumn is on the line with us. She has to hop off for another meeting at 6:30. So I'm going to have her jump in since there was a developer forum that was hosted by SEDCO a couple weeks ago. And so Autumn, do you want to give an update from that?
Can you guys hear me okay? I have the owl already on for my other meeting. So we had a developer forum on May 23rd. It was myself and Angela Blanchett, the town engineer, and Karen Martin with SEDCO. We presented our environmental standards and the traffic impact fees to the group. We were hoping to have a summary. Karen is preparing a summary of the comments that were given at the meeting. The reception was less than favorable for the setbacks that were proposed. I think what we expected was what was shown from the development group. We did get some feedback that if council wanted to direct us to continue work on these, we could have a working group. So we got some parties that agreed to be part of that. We did have 2 counselors at the meeting and heard the comments. And at this point, the environmental standards have somewhat stalled. So that's a very brief summary of what happened.
Pete has raised his hand. Pete.
Yeah, thanks for the summary, Autumn. Is there are there opportunities for other comment in terms of other forums that will be held by the community to get feedback from the community, not just the developing community?
At this point, I haven't received any direction to do that, but I think that would be great if we did.
Because we consider this just kind of like the starting point for the discussions. So this is not necessarily what we would end up with. So it seems to me that it would be sad if this was sunk just because of one forum being held and getting some negative feedback based on that.
To be perfectly honest, I think we went in too high. It was almost like we presented there we are. We went in so high that the group didn't see any potential for negotiation. And that was sort of the response that I received. I think we could definitely take a look at what we presented and try to present a reduced set of standards or maybe more streamlined. But at this point, I haven't received any direction from anyone to take it forward anywhere. We do, though, on a positive note, Jamie showed me the DEP's state LID low impact development standards that are out there for public input right now. And what the date is July 22nd, Jamie, that the public can comment on these. These are part of our MS4 requirements. And so there's 30 communities that will be required, mandated to adhere to these standards. When I take a look at those standards, they make some of our standards look fine and great. And so it may be that those wouldn't be into place until next October if they get adopted. And I'm sure there'll be several iterations and conversations about those. But I have not lost all hope that we won't end up with something. I think those might actually be the standards that get put into place and mandated on us that we can look to.
Is it possible to have that shared with us, those draft standards that for the LID?
Yeah.
stuff?
Yes, I can send those out. I will say Autumn and I just chatted briefly about them today, and we have a meeting scheduled in a couple weeks to go through them more thoroughly and develop comments on behalf of the town. There's a lot of, they need to refine them. There's a lot of room for interpretation. They're not entirely clear. So there's a lot of comments like that, but I think you can get the general gist of it, and I'm happy to share those after the meeting also. I'll send them around.
Thanks. Kathleen and then Karen.
This may be like a question out of ignorance, but like, are the what is the process? I mean, the SEDCO people have some major amount of control over what happens? Because I mean, it seems like,
Sure.
How do we,
So, well, it seems like that, but the ordinance committee reviewed the draft, and then they requested that we send it to the developer forum, and we did that. And then the ordinance committee, I have not heard back that they want to see it again. And so that's where it's sort of stuck in the process, right? And Counselor Shoup may be able to help get it out of that process, but that's where it's at right now.
Thanks, Karen.
Sure. So that's frustrating to hear. I did know that it went to SEDCO. I guess my first question was, who are the counselors that were at the SEDCO meeting?
So John Anderson and Jean Marie Caterina were there.
Okay. So I think that's important, because I think the best thing that, first steps, if people in this meeting are like, let's move this along, like you could reach out to them and say, like, what do you think next steps are? Because I'm curious what next steps are, where, I mean, in my mind, we've already gone to most of the groups we need to go to. So now we were reaching out to SEDCO and the development community. So when Pete's saying, are there other groups to reach out to? I'm like, who? Like, now it's time to compromise. If we need to compromise, fine. But I definitely don't want this to die. And it has, because I've heard nothing for weeks, even though I knew that this forum took place. And so that's frustrating. It would be great to get the comments from Karen Martin. It just seems like a delay tactic at this point, that like, oh, they're just not getting them back to us to understand really what the issue is. I'd like to continue this along. And if we can all remind our counselors, and I will as well, like, this is really important to us, and this is in regards to our goals and things like that. I mean, this is huge. And so I think what we want to probably do is next step is follow up with ordinance and try to get it back to them and see if they're open to that. I mean, obviously I'll take any advice from Autumn or Jamie or anyone else, but I don't want this to die. And I can tell for the last month, I'm like, where is this? Because I know it went to SEDCO and then we heard nothing.
Thanks, Karen. And
I'm sorry, I'm fixing to have to leave.
go ahead, Autumn.
But I can just say, I can reach out to Counselor Katarina again to see if she'd be willing to take it back to ordinance and then to maybe set up a working group to come to some compromise. That's really probably my next suggestion to see if anyone wants to do that. But I can get back to you on that. But that's probably the best case scenario, I think, at this point. I think if we took it, the process is a little different. It's supposed to come from ordinance committee to the full council. So it gets sort of stopped. So I have to go through that mechanism. But completely willing to ask again if we can continue to look at it and then maybe set up that working group so we can continue to move it along. All right, I have to go. Sorry.
Got him.
Thanks, Autumn.
Jamie, for everyone, Jamie dropped in the chat a link to the developer forum, which is great because that was the next question I was going to have, which is this recorded? Was it a public meeting? Because we all deserve to be able to see and listen to these discussions, just as they've listened to, we've been open and available to the town in our discussions.
Randy, can I just specify that? So the link that's in the chat, and I'll include it in the email follow-up that I send also, should bring you right to the start of the environmental standards discussion at that forum. So it was about 50 minutes into the meeting when they took up the environmental standards. They started off with traffic impact fees. So
Great,
hopefully.
thanks. Pete says it's also in the minutes.
Oh, okay. Look at me. I had forgotten I did that. Thanks, Pete.
So I want to ask Kathleen's question again from kind of a different angle, which is what's the process? What role in an ordinance review process or recommendation does SEDCO have? What is SEDCO's relationship to the town of Scarborough's government? And then I have a follow-up question on that, Jamie.
Sure. So in terms of SEDCO, I mean, they represent our business and development community. And I don't know, the SEDCO as a body, I don't believe has taken a position on this. They basically just provided the opportunity for developers to hear about what was being proposed. So the fact, though, that there were two counselors at that meeting that heard just that feedback, and they probably haven't been privy to the discussions that this group has been having. So they're only hearing from the developer community. And so I think that that's what led to a pumping of the brakes, so to speak. So it would probably be helpful for members of this group to touch base with other counselors to see, and Karen also as our liaison, just to see how we can move forward with this. And as Autumn mentioned, they discussed a working group, and that may be a way to kind of reach some compromise and bring some people along. Developers aren't going to like this, though, I don't think, no matter what this group comes up with. And so we really, hopefully people are looking at this in terms of what's best for the town of Scarborough and our natural resources, and it's all related to our open space plan and our vulnerability assessment and things like that. So looking beyond kind of beyond the, economics of it and thinking about, looking beyond, bigger than that.
Yeah.
Our quality of life in Scarborough.
Right. And thank you for that. And, we did a workshop, what is it now, 2 Marches ago? Or was it just, it was 2 Marches ago.
2023.
23. Okay. Yep. For the whole town council, but it's really the only time I believe that more than one counselor has heard us in deliberation and heard beyond what Councillor Shoup is providing at the town council meetings about our deliberations. It would be great to have them, rather than, 10 of us write 10 separate letters, which would be great. Could there be a chance to invite Councilors Anderson and Katerina to come to a Conservation Commission meeting to hear what our reasoning is behind this and why we feel so passionate about this, and that we would want something where there's a where we could reach a common agreement rather than being shut down every single time we try to move things out of this commission. And I would wonder your thoughts about that, Councilor Shoup.
So Jean Marie Caterina is the chair of ordinance. So I think she would be, and she is, you know, a real estate agent. She is, so I think she is about housing and things like that. I think, and so I think where John Anderson, I think, would easily be able to understand our perspective and where we're coming from and the priorities we have with the environment in Scarborough. Jean Marie is in control of the ordinance agenda, really what goes forward. And sometimes it is just whatever staff is working on, and that's just what's coming up next. And as you just kind of saw, and if we're not pushing staff and we're waiting for someone's notes and things like that, you know, business as usual for council. And so, I mean, obviously I'm going to be reaching out to Jean Marie. I've already given her a hard time about this at the beginning. She kicked you guys from like the February agenda, I think, to March or something. And I was already not happy with her about that. So I'm happy to circle back around with her. She's in control of that. She's really the one that you want to go. So I think if you watch that forum and be like, wow, like, you know, we really would like the opportunity for you to get back on the ordinance agenda and have you come to our meeting. If you have any questions before, if you're not willing to put us on the agenda, will you come to a meeting, hear us deliberate, and then maybe consider that? Because I've never been in that position where you're actually completely in control of an agenda like that. So I think it's really important to kind of get to her directly and try to offer our perspective. I mean, for me, I'm like, oh my God, all these volunteers, we spent so much time on this and it's dead in the water because of like SEDCO. I'm like, So anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pete, excuse me. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I just have one more comment about it. And I'm wondering, this might be jumping the gun. It might take time, this might not be the right time, but I'm wondering if it makes sense to have like if this goes back to ordinance committee, to have some more supporting information on why we have decided on the numbers that we have in there, and why we settled on what we presented, because I don't think there's additional context that necessarily was provided fully to ordinance. And I didn't watch the YouTube video yet, so I don't know how it was presented yet to the developing community. But I think there needs to be a pretty strong case as to why, you know, we didn't just pick these numbers out of the air for the most part. So there's some reasoning behind why we're trying to protect the marsh more than other things, why we're trying to protect vernal pools. And, you know, there is, I think, the way we approached this, at least in the preliminary discussions that we had, was shoot for the moon here and then settle. That's not going to be the final document. That is what's considered. At least that's the approach we always discussed as a group and also with planning. So it seems to me that having it just shot down and have it go nowhere at all is just not even the right. It's just not the right thing, especially when we knew from the beginning that we should shoot for something high, knowing that we're probably going to settle on something closer to the middle. So
I mean, Pete, Karen's got her hand raised, but Pete, I don't know that we were unreasonable in our what we proposed in this ordinance. It's best, you know, it's good practice. It wasn't unreasonable. It wasn't the moon. It was within our atmosphere, definitely. And something that I think we'd want to be able to implement. But what I believe you're referring to is that we were willing to negotiate different numbers. So yeah, just having it shut down. Reasonable people disagree, and reasonable people also have ways to coming together for the good of the community. Karen?
Yeah, I just, before we compromise, I mean, Autumn just mentioned that the DEP is coming out with new regulations next October for MSR2 communities. I mean, that could be our negotiating tool. If they're way up here, we're here, and the developers want us here, we'll be like, actually, we're right where we need to be. I think it would be really important if we could get those and compare them. And then that might be the only argument we need to support where we are right now. Personally, I mean, if we could get those and that helps us, I mean, I think that could turn us around right now and say, this is good. Could be worse.
Thank
Will
you.
be worse.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just
Kathleen.
wanted to
Oh,
say
go ahead,
too that,
Jamie and Kathleen.
yeah, I mean, I think this is the first time that the developers had even really maybe seen it and have not necessarily digested it. So I think it's definitely like sticker shock, for lack of a better term. But knowing that there's similar regulations that are going to be required coming. And again, what DEP is putting out are basically the minimum standards that towns are going to be required to adopt. So it's not going to be statewide. It is still going to be municipality by municipality, but all of our neighboring municipalities will be required to adopt them. So it's not like we're going to be out on a limb. We're going to be working with our the other municipalities, or in line with the municipalities in our region. And so whether it's our environmental standards that we move forward with, or DEP's low impact development performance standards that we are required to adopt, change is coming. And so it's good, I think, that they're at least going to be aware and seeing that this is going to be coming in one form or another.
Thanks, Jamie. Kathleen?
I guess I have just a kind of procedural question. You know, we were talking about like reaching out directly to counselors. Do we do that as individuals in the community, or as like, hi, I'm a member of the Conservation Commission and I want to talk to you about this ordinance that we would like to see come up again in the ordinance committee? Like, how do we, I'm just politically, like, how do we best use our time and space?
My hand is still up, so I think it's great to identify yourself, because I mean, it really puts validity behind what's being said. I mean, you show up every month, you're reading the material, like you are contributing every month to this cause. We've been talking about this forever, and I think it's really important to highlight that. I put so much value in volunteers and the amount of time and effort that you guys put in, and I think it's important to highlight that and definitely say that that's where you're coming from. And you're sitting in a room full of experts. I mean, it's not like we're just making this out of thin air.
So I feel like we talked about a few different next steps out of this, which does include individual contact, but we're also going to be connecting with through inviting them to hear more from us about this, and Karen can help walk us through it as well. And Jamie will capture additional notes after this meeting.
Yes.
Okay. If that's all on environmental standards for tonight, we'll move on to planning board submittals. And maybe Jamie, could you tee this up for us, please?
Yeah, so there were a number of submittals, and Eric, I don't know if you want to just, yeah, Eric's here since Autumn had to duck out. So if you want to give just an overview or of the ones that were submitted, and then I'm recommending that we take a closer look at the submittal related to the Ann-Johns property, and we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so to Jamie's point, Ann-Johns, their address is formerly 521 Route 1. They are requesting to resume their non-conforming use, so a restaurant is not allowed in that zone. And pursuant to the zoning ordinance, if a non-conforming use ceases for a year or more, an applicant must come back to the Zoning Board of Appeals to resume that use. To Jamie's point, I think the town has a lot of concerns with that. There is a memo from Tom Hall that is being included in the materials for the planning board as part of their advisory opinion to the ZBA for that process, with the town's concerns on the existing septic system and the stormwater. I mean, it's right there on the marsh. in Phillipsbrook. So it's very impactful to some of our most important resources. So as Jamie said, that might be something the commission might want to take a look at. There's not a ton of info because the existing improvements are mostly going to be internal, beyond any repairs that would need to be made to the wastewater. So we don't have a ton right now. It's mostly the appeal application and a description of them asking to resume the use. But Jamie did provide the link to those materials, and I'm happy to answer any questions as part of the process.
And just, this is a resuming use. We're not hearing about expansion of parking lot, for example, or change in the original business or additional development.
Essentially, because they haven't been in operation for over a year, they are required to go through the Zoning Board of Appeals to be approved, since, as Eric mentioned, it's a non-conforming use in that zoning district. So to give a little bit of background, and I think I provided some links in the materials that went out prior to the meeting, and the property has an overboard discharge, which is essentially a primitive waste or a small scale wastewater treatment plant. It was permitted probably 40 years ago now, or licensed 40 years ago from Maine DEP. It comes up for license renewal every 5 years. And because there isn't another viable option for that property, DEP continues to issue the license. So even though they're aware of the sensitive area that it's in, and they're aware, based on the inspection documents that were included in the materials in the planning board submittals, the system is in poor condition. And in speaking with DEP, they've told us that it really needs to be replaced. But they are not in a position to deny the license. So it's really, they're encouraging the town, if this is an issue for the town, the town can deny their business use. I don't know that there's the political will for the town to do that. So at a minimum, we can request regular sampling of the effluent coming out of the system to understand if it is impacting Phillipsbrook and the marsh. I will note that in the Phillipsbrook Watershed Management Plan, which was approved by DEP in 2018, there is a discussion of the overboard discharge, and DEP recommends that it be removed from the watershed. But it's also DEP that continues to license it within the watershed. So it's just this interesting little catch-22. So the commission can provide some comments and recommendations to the planning board as part of their review of this and recommendation to the zoning board. And Eric and I can try to answer more questions. I see hands, so if you have comments or questions.
Thanks, Pete, and then Abel.
I'm not sure if this is a real, I guess it's a question. So did somebody say that there aren't going to be any improvements to the property? Because I was reading one of the documents it had the parking lot was going to be improved, seal coated, striped, et cetera, et cetera.
It's not going to be expanded. Like those types of things are considered maintenance, and aren't even really required. They wouldn't require a permit because it's just regular maintenance of the parking lot.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.
Abel?
Thanks for providing the inspection reports. I tried to look through them, and yeah, it looks like since 2020, there have been various issues. And I think the most recent one showed that they had done some repairs. So at least that was somewhat beneficial. But I guess just my question is, so is there going to be a 2024 inspection? Because it seems like the last one was from about a year ago. And just in regards to the letter from the manager, Tom Hall, are there going to be action items associated with? Because it seems like they want to go from a yearly inspection to at least quarterly, hopefully monthly. So I'm wondering will that give any sort of mechanism? So if they do find something wrong, does that give them the ability to take action, or is it? I guess I'm just not sure on how that works.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So DEP does an inspection of the system on an annual basis. We have been told that because there is less than 2,000 gallons of effluent coming out of the system per day, DEP considers this de minimis. It's a de minimis, kind of a minimal pollutant input to Phillipsbrook and Scarborough Marsh. And so it's not something that is high up on their priority list to get rid of. And as I mentioned also, basically when because the license was issued 30 to 40 years ago, and there's still not really a viable alternative, their hands are kind of tied at this point. Because the license has been issued, they're going to continue to issue the license. So the sampling that we're talking about is actually collecting samples of the water coming out of the system after it's theoretically been treated to see the levels of bacteria that are in there and make sure that it's meeting the minimum standard that is set by DEP and EPA. Right now, their license doesn't require them to do any sampling of the water coming out of the system. And so the town is requesting that the license be opened up, the permit be opened up, and that requirement be added. And that was at the suggestion of DEP staff. They couldn't really they didn't tell us initially like what frequency of sampling, which is why we said quarterly or monthly. And after they received the letter, they're like, really, they should be doing it weekly. So like
Okay.
DEP, give us this information. Like this isn't an
Guidance,
overboard
yeah.
discharge isn't something that we typically deal with on a regular basis. So we were thinking that monthly was going to be too much. And they're like, no, really, it should be weekly sampling and analysis of the effluent from the system. So that should be a recommendation likely from planning board and zoning board that they're required to do, collect weekly samples and do the analysis, or have a certified lab do the analysis and provide that information to the town and to DEP.
So is that something that if the Conservation Commission says we would like to see weekly, that would be the kind of helpful advice to the zoning?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Bennett?
I mean, I think that the
Sorry.
Conservation Commission could take the stand that this, if the commission agrees that this system should not be in place
period. Yeah.
at all. But short of denying the license, this would be kind of the minimum requirement that we would like to see.
Thanks. Bennett?
Just so, I actually work at an environmental laboratory, and we do this sort of testing, and not with the intention of trying to bring more business to my lab here, but in general, wherever this goes, I would recommend that they begin at least with a weekly sampling effort, including not just bacteria, but specifically for E. coli, fecal coliforms, and also oil and grease. And then you see what kind of problems you have. If you don't have any problems over say 2 months or whatever, we pick some time frame, then they can reduce to monthly sampling, but you start off weekly because you don't know what's going to be going on. And that's really, I just want to throw it out, that there's more to just, regular bacteria. And I want to make sure that we're catching anything that might be causing a problem to the marsh. And yeah, start off frequently, and then you can reduce the frequency if they show that they're not having an issue. That seems like a reasonable thing to me.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing your professional experience into this discussion. Thanks. Pete?
Quick follow-up for Bennett, maybe also something to consider. I'm not sure how to term this, but the amount of use or the volume of the effluent, could that influence what their testing is showing? In other words, do you want to test during high volume use? Like, I don't know, let's say they're not going to be open probably 4th of July, but let's say if they're open 4th of July weekend and they're really, really busy, is that better to test then than just some random day during the week?
Yeah, really the general thing is you should assume that they're going to be having relatively consistent waste streams. Now you'll have more waste streams when they're busier, but if you look at what is their total, outflow over a month, and then you look at what do you find in a sample, you just rate it for how much, assume that amount's going to be in every gallon that you have or every liter you have for their whole flow. Because it's not like they're going to be doing, if they're selling French fries or something, they're going to sell more French fries on 4th of July than they are the rest of the month, but that's probably the same portion of their business on an everyday basis. That's, approximately. So I would say just look at the total outflow, and then you can see, if we're looking at a 1 liter sample, for example, and they went through 4,000 liters in, a day or something, then that's how much is going through. So that's my suggestion anyway.
And I assume, and this is a 100% assumption, but I assume that DEP will give them kind of the sampling plan that they need to follow and have an approved lab and approved sampling techniques and things like that.
Yes,
we
but
can
we
confirm
could
that,
we
but-
could build on top of that. We can ask them to show us what are they being asked to do by DEP, and then we could say, well, we'd like you to also do, this, or we'd like to see weekly reports for 2 months or something initially, and then you can reduce to whatever DEP gives you for your permit. And that can be a condition of approval by the ZBA or whatever, or the planning board. I'm not sure if it's just an advisory opinion for the planning board, so we may not be able to do a conditional approval there, but it can be something that's, this is your plan you have to follow for the town, shows that you're not polluting the marsh terribly. I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Thanks, Bennett. Jamie, I have a question, and this is, it's a matter of timing. So we're talking about today, but however long in the future, we can anticipate there will be changes to Route 1. Given the climate review and assessment that has been conducted.
Yep.
And I'm imagining that's going to affect any structure along Route 1. So I don't know how we might want to be thinking about that in relation to this advisory notice.
I mean, I think you can probably mention that DOT is planning to raise the road by 3 to 4 feet, and they will lose their access, driveway access, parking lot access on Route 1.
Okay.
So but I don't know that necessarily plays into this immediate review, just because that will be a couple of years in the future.
It feels like it might just add some color or context to the everything that we're thinking about. That this is a sensitive area. There's already serious amount of work that's being done to mitigate continued damage to the marsh. And this is another piece of that. Pete, and then Karen.
One quick follow-up question. Does anybody know if Amore on the Marsh, Ann-Johns, whatever you want to call it, flooded out during the January events? And was there any damage or pollution that resulted from that, from other stuff they might have had inside? Just wondering.
I don't know for sure, but I do know that our public safety individuals were down in that section of Route 1 because it was closed off. So I can ask it. I would assume that it flooded, just looking at the extent of the flooding during the January storms on Route 1.
I was just wondering if that was kind of like another route, because they probably have oil tanks and other stuff inside that if that gets knocked over from flooding, et cetera, there's another threat there, a big threat to the marsh, not the 2,000 up to 2,000 gallons of OBD discharges is not a threat, but you know, that's a very vulnerable area, in terms of, you know, if there are, whether oil tanks, whatever you want to consider inside, that could potentially, pollute the marsh. I didn't know if that was another kind of line to think down. Thanks.
Karen and then Abel.
Sure. Where is this in the process? Has this gone before the ZBA yet?
No, it needs to get an advisory opinion from planning board first. So it will go to planning board in July and ZBA probably in August.
And it's a special exception application to the ZBA, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I used to be on the ZBA for about 8 years. So if anyone really wants to make an impact on this, you actually want to show up to the ZBA meeting, because the first thing under the ZBA special exemption application is, will the proposed use not create an unsanitary or unhealthful condition by reason of sewage disposal, emissions to the air, water, or other aspects of the design or operation? So if people from this commission show up to a ZBA meeting, send a memo to the ZBA and say, hard no, look at number one, look at this plan, because I've watched this happen where the ZBA is actually the one who would be issuing the first license to even let them reopen, where I think personally, this is where you would shut it down and say, you can't do it under letter A here for the special exemptions, would be my recommendation. I don't know if this committee has the authority to send a memo to the ZBA. I think that's would be the most impactful as well.
Thank you. Abel?
Thanks. Just one kind of follow-up comment to Pete's question about if the building had sustained damage during the recent storms. I just kind of, you know, as I think I asked before about, you know, is there going to be a new inspection for this year? Because the last one was from about a year ago. So if there was damage, I would also be curious to see, I don't know if that system can get damaged in a storm or not. So I guess until we have a more recent inspection showing that it is operating correctly, I don't know if that's another thing we'd want to just make sure before they start, you know, was any damage done? Is the system still in the same condition as it was a year ago? You know, assuming it wasn't damaged or not.
I meant to comment on that when you asked it the first time. So sorry, I answered another question, but missed that one. So we have spoken with the inspector, the DEP inspector. He has been out on site within the last couple of weeks. We
Okay.
haven't gotten the written inspection report from him. He did say that the system looked better than it has in years. So they have made repairs to the system. However, he did still say it should be replaced, or it is going to need to be replaced soon.
Okay.
So it's better, but it's still not up to the condition that it should be based on his assessment.
Thank you, Jim.
Bennett, and then I want to get to a sense of what do we want as a commission to say. Bennett?
I guess that was also kind of my question, Randy, was are we looking to try and shut it down entirely? Because the question there is if it doesn't reopen, you have an abandoned building on the marsh for decades, and then you're going to have more problems as things flood. Something's got to happen to it, and I don't know. I think we're better off trying to push for the right improvement, even though it's not an ideal situation. It's already there. You can't just I mean, unless you're gonna pay to demolish it, but where are you gonna get the money for that? That's kind of obviously we wouldn't let this thing be built today if it was a brand new thing, but there's already a parking lot there. There's already a restaurant there. There's already, you know, a kitchen set up and everything. So how do you deal with it in the best way? You know, it's not a brand new building. We got to do something to it. That's where I'm at.
Thank you. All right, Pete, one more, and then we'll go to sort of direction we want to go.
My last thought is this would make for a great community-led NIFWF, National Fish and Wildlife Fund, maybe I think it's called.
Yep.
Yeah, foundation project, possibly. And then working with the state, because the state owns all the land around that area, and it's actually directly discharging into, I think, state of Maine IF&W land. So there could be the potential for looking at some NIFWF funds to pursue, you know, if anything does happen with this structure. So in an answer to Abel and actually to Bennett's question.
Thank you. Yes, so there are options, in other words. Okay, so I'm hearing that there's the option for us to say, we as a commission do not want this going any further. We have an option of saying, if you do go further, we want to see a minimum of weekly samples with additional layers beyond what DEP might require. I also am hearing about a requirement that could be to replace the system before operation comes up again, and to clarify prior damage in the past year. And then that we send this to the planning board, but also to the zoning board. What am I missing? And Jamie, I don't know if you can help sort of layer what I just heard.
Yeah, I think you captured the comments that I was hearing also. I just need to get some guidance from probably from Autumn and Brian Longstaff, our zoning administrator, who is the staff liaison to the Zoning Board of Appeals, just to see if it's appropriate for this this commission to include the zoning board in a memo regarding this parcel. The other thing I want to reiterate is were Karen's comments about having people attend the zoning board meeting and express concerns. I don't know how often people show up to the Zoning Board of Appeals meetings, but the public comment could be, yeah, Karen's saying never. So having people show up with an interest in that would probably be helpful.
Garner some attention. Thanks. Maggie.
So the question I have is when there are existing structures like this that have, I think someone said this probably wouldn't be passed now if it were built. It wouldn't be allowed to be built where it is right now. What's been the precedent in the past? What does the town look at? Okay, we want these changes to be made. We want. Is there a precedent for this, rather than just, oh yeah, go right ahead?
I'm not sure if there's a precedent in Scarborough or what has happened in other towns for that matter. I could see, offering to purchase the building and restore, like remove it and restore the area, do a marsh restoration project there. It's going to, the Route 1 project is going to complicate that parcel and make it, not ideal for a restaurant to be there, because instead of looking out over the marsh, you're going to be looking at a retaining wall. So, I think that there's a lot of extenuating circumstances with that parcel. I can't say what a precedent would be. I think that, the town would try to do what we can. So, to restore that area, and so that the property owner could recoup some of the losses. But if there's no viable waste disposal system on site, that property is essentially has no value.
Jamie, when is this, when do we need this memo or this advisory complete by?
So it will go to the planning board on February 15th, oh my goodness, July 15th. Oh my gosh.
You skipped way ahead.
And then the zoning board would be in August at the earliest, because they'll have to get the information from planning board before the zoning board will take it up.
So we've done this before where Jamie drafts something for our review based on our conversation, general agreement in this meeting, and gotten her finals before delivery. Oh, given how the conversation was summarized and the notes that Jamie took and affirmed, is there further discussion before we ask Jamie to put it into a draft for us to review?
I guess I would maybe ask the commission to prioritize, like what's most important? Would you like to see the system removed entirely? And then if that's not an option, have it replaced. And then if that's not an option, at a minimum, have weekly sampling done.
Pete, can I hang on a sec, or did you want to weigh in on that piece?
Well, I just very quickly wanted to say, I put in the chat a link to DEP grants for getting rid of OBD discharges. I don't know if this was researched at all or looked at. I just found it. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Nice. You all heard the one, that's how I understood the priority. Is there anyone who has a sense that, or a preference otherwise? Bennett.
I'm concerned that if we say we want to shut down the whole project, we're going to get the same thing we got with the environmental standards and get nowhere. So I think we need to be very careful. I mean, I think we should maybe say that's the preferable option, and this is why. And then in 2 years, it's going to be, you know, with the raising of Route 1, to specify all that, and this is why we think that would be the best option. But we need to be thorough with the other options, I think, because otherwise, that's just the way that things flow in this town, planning board, ZBA, people try and get people they try and let business owners do their thing, develop, open, etc. And if all we're saying is no, there's a decent chance we're going to get shut down. So I think we really need to be careful about how we phrase that.
I think that sounds fair. And I think I'm hearing that we have several good reasons and even options for what to do with the building if it were to not be occupied anymore. We have some options there, but we have some strong context for why that's what we lead with. And knowing that perhaps that's unlikely, we want to see these minimum things, boom, boom, boom. Maybe could I get a thumbs up or a thumbs equal or down based on what we just discussed? And if you still have a question, raise your hand. Just to get a sense around the room-ish. And Abel has a question. I didn't catch all the thumbs, but Abel, go ahead.
Sure. I guess just we'll have to see how the draft comes out, but I guess I feel like it's probably, you know, again, if this were starting from scratch today, because of the sensitive nature, we would not be on board. That being said, we understand it does have technically an existing license. However, at a minimum, we would strongly like to see this monitoring put in place at a minimum to mirror DEP requirements and potentially more based on the results. Like, I guess that's how I'm thinking about it. So is it kind of just a tiered, you know, you could just come out and say, this would not be our ideal situation. However, if it's going to happen, then we would like to see X, Y, Z. Is that kind of the idea?
I like that.
I'll go with that.
Okay, Pete, so a little bit, Kathleen sounds like she's a little on the, what are we going to see in your, do you want to share what we would see in your adjustments to that draft?
I'd like to see this thing shut down
Yeah.
as a priority, but that's the way I would like to go with it. And I mean, there's funding that's available to do it. The individual owner can actually apply to get that funding to do it. But I do understand they have an existing license. But this is like an eyesore on the marsh, and it's one of the last big ones that are there. So, I mean, I'll go with what the commission decides, but I'm gonna stay like that on prioritizing on allowing it to continue.
Thank you. Kathleen?
My feelings are pretty similar.
And Marla?
Well, I'm just wondering if we could somehow let the actual property owner know the thoughts of this Conservation Commission, because the applicant is I believe a renter. Is that correct? Or I think there might be like an option to purchase the property at some point, especially with grant funding available. That could be really appealing to that landowner, but how do you let that person know? I mean, yes, I would love to see that property, essentially rehabilitated and become part of the Scarborough Marsh ecosystem again. Just a couple thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Marla.
So I'll say that really the only option there other than an overboard discharge would be to extend sewer. And extending the public sewer line that distance is cost prohibitive. So even with a grant from DEP, I don't see that being a viable option for them because it is a significant expense.
Jamie, do you have enough to do a draft? And then if you do, you're usually pretty good about turning it around quickly.
Yes,
so like
I will.
next week we could probably start taking a look at it.
Yeah, so just to let you all know, I will be on vacation next week. So I'll do my best to get a draft out to you by Thursday so that you can have next week to kind of work through it and make comments and revisions. We'll work through a Google Doc that you'll all have access to.
Thank you. I found that a really great and helpful discussion, folks. Thank you. Other items on planning board, we see the flycatcher memo from the critter crossings.
Yeah, I can give a quick update on that as well. Or Eric, if you want to, since you were at the planning board meeting, you can.
Yeah, I can kind of quickly summarize. So the Downs actually ended up taking out that section of the roadway. So it's essentially the subdivision amendment was reduced down to just include the frontage of the lots for the sanitary district pump station and intermed. So they are going to work through some of those comments for the road design. I think they're going to add at least one more culvert. It might not be as many as the commission wants, but I know they're working to sort of improve the critter crossings. So there'll be further review on that as well.
And the planning board basically made it a condition of approval. So before any other subdivision amendments go through, they need to address that road and address the staff's comments, which included a lot of the commission's comments. I think it basically came down to, in order for kind of the pump station to be constructed, which is necessary for that part of the development, they recognized that the town wasn't gonna give in to what they were proposing, and so we need to find some compromise, and they need a little bit more time to make that happen.
Thanks, Jamie. Bennett?
I would just add that included in that subdivision amendment was a lot for intermed. And before they can even open intermed, they also have to deal with and figure out the road situation. And I'll also add that there's significant interest within the planning board in making sure that we get a good environmentally conscious solution for the road, whatever happens. So it's, yeah, as Jamie and Erica said, it's frozen for now, basically with nothing, but they know that they need to do significant work, and hopefully we'll get further. Doesn't mean we shouldn't keep talking about it in this committee, but it's not super urgent anymore, which is good to know for now.
Yeah, good to know about the environmental commitment there. Thank you. And thanks, Eric. Anything else, Eric, you think we ought to be spending time on tonight?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, pretty much everything else is in an already developed area that's not really too close to any resource. So I think Ann-John's was the big one. But if anything comes up, feel free to reach out and please be involved in the planning board process and provide comment. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to new business, the piping plover ordinance. Jamie.
All right, so this is being brought to this group at the request of the town council. So back in March, the council, the ordinance committee and the council looked at proposed revisions to the piping plover ordinance that were brought forward by volunteers, our members of our volunteer beach monitors who are involved in our piping plover program. And so recognizing that there were some gaps in the existing ordinance that that should be addressed, and the ordinance hadn't been updated in 10 years or so. And in 10 years, a lot has changed in terms of the toys that we're using out on the beach, like drones, not very common 10 years ago. They are common now. And drones can be an issue for piping plovers because they think they're predators. Also, just trying to make the wording a little bit more general. So when these new toys come onto the market, our ordinance will still capture them. So another example would be like the one wheel, like the electric skateboards and things like that people will use on hard packed sand. So those were some of the kind of the impetus for proposing revisions to the ordinance. There are many more revisions in addition to those, including setting a time frame for when the ordinance is in effect, essentially from April 1st through Labor Day. That's when nesting is most common on our beaches, including least terns. The past several years, we've had endangered least terns nesting on our beaches. The past several years, they've been on Higgins Beach. This year, they're on Western Beach. And then just trying to clarify and clean things up a little bit, make the penalties for violating more in line with other ordinances like our animal control ordinance and things like that. I will say that if you follow kind of our challenges on our beaches related to piping plovers at all, you'll hear a lot about dogs and the concern that dogs pose. This ordinance doesn't address dogs really at all. That's our animal control ordinance. And so the ordinance went to town council in March. There was a lot of pushback because I think the larger community didn't know that this was happening, and there was a lot of assumptions being made. Town council requested that the stakeholders that originally brought the changes forward work with members of the dog group to kind of talk through the changes and find some common ground. And they did that. They met 4 times over the spring to kind of discuss the proposed revisions. And it seems like they have reached some consensus. And so the commission this evening is being asked to review and provide comment on the revisions in front of you. The Community Services Advisory Board is also being asked to look at this, and they'll do so in July. And then after that, it'll go back to the ordinance committee for the regular public process as well. So
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, absolutely. I can answer questions if you got them. Walk through some of the recommendations if you are curious about them.
Pete, and then Bennett.
I think in general, this makes a lot of sense. Higgins Beach doesn't have a beach at high tide. The only place where it does have a beach at high tide is where the spit is, where the birds are. So there's constant conflict. I'm down there almost every day, so I see it anecdotally, where people have set up huge 13, 15 person rings with their games and everything, literally right next to where the plovers are nesting. So I think this is highly needed just because of the demand on the beach. It's a shame that there isn't other areas of the beach where there's actually a beach, but that's the way it is. The one question I had about this is there are volunteer monitors that monitor profiles at the beach that are not authorized by Maine IFNW or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And they are next to this area that would be within the area that they're describing. I wanted to make sure that it does not impact them. And that's it.
I don't quite understand what you are referring to.
There are
profiles, you said?
there are volunteer beach profilers, they're called, who monitor at Higgins Beach, and one of the locations is directly adjacent and within the Piping Plover fenced off area sometimes. I don't know how they deal with that now, but I just wanted to make sure that those volunteers can still get the data that they need to get to provide information on how the shoreline is changing there.
Oh, I see.
So they would have to work with IF&W to get authorization to go within the management, and that's how it is currently.
Okay,
Only authorized individuals should be within their the management that they set up to mark the nesting areas.
right. Yeah, so there's a training program that you have to go through and all that, so.
Yeah, so as
Um,
long as they're working with IF&W and getting authorized to be in those areas, I don't see, I mean, that's, like I said, that's not a change from how the process currently is. That's not entirely something that the town would necessarily enforce. You know, they may be asked, are you supposed to be in there, or asked to leave the area? Because I mean, we don't necessarily know who's authorized to be in there or not. But, you know, with an explanation and things like that, I think that we could work around it, but that shouldn't be affected by what's being proposed.
Okay, I like the
Bennett?
language.
Bennett?
Just thinking about maybe future proofing, this ordinance a little bit more, because I know we're trying to update it to include more modern toys, but we don't really know what there might be in even in 5 years, let alone 15 or something. And I'm not trying to be what about something like a hoverboard or something similar we can't really imagine right now that might be a popular beach toy in 10 years. Do we want to do, if we put in the wheeled thing, maybe it should be something about wheeled and or any other sort of personal vehicle or something that operates near the beach. I don't really know how to word that, but I just thinking if we can do anything to avoid having to come back to modify this ordinance again, because you don't know that's going to get done in 5 or 10 years. You don't know who's going to be on, town council. You don't know who's going to have what priorities. You kind of want to think about, and it's hard to know what's going to be in the future, but you kind of want to think about how do you get the best language that you can serve you the best going forward. So I would just try and add in something that thinks about future technologies that may or may not ever happen.
Thanks. Good point. Marla? You're muted.
My only comment is related to the use of Labor Day, because I'm just wondering if everybody who visits our beaches are actually aware with what that date is. I just know there are a lot of people who come from out of the country, and particularly Canada, but other countries as well, who have homes in Scarborough, or maybe they're just visiting. And is it clear to everybody? Maybe it's not an issue. I don't know.
Good point. Jamie, the point recreational activity B, any individuals moving at a pace faster than a walk, such as jogging or running. A strong agreement that should remain. Because frankly, it's even easy to accidentally step on a baby chick when you're walking. That's how invisible they can be when they freeze, or even if they're just moving along. It's very difficult to see them. And so I would encourage that guidelines stay in there.
If I were to guess, if anything is going to change in this ordinance, it's going to be that one. I think that is likely to come out based on public comment, but I think it will probably go to the ordinance committee with it in there, and we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
That one's a hard one. I mean, we
Yeah,
did
it
a
is.
workshop last last week with some town councilors, and Councilor Seither brought her kids with her, which I thought was great. They thought that the birds were adorable and stuff. But kids run to the water.
Right.
Like, how are you
Yeah.
supposed to regulate? That one's a tough one. I fully understand where people were coming from with that one, but that one's a really hard one, I think, for
Yep.
that one's going to be a hard one for people to accept.
Anything else that you need from us, Jamie?
Nope, if there are any other comments or anything like that, otherwise, we'll be able, I will pull together a cover letter or cover memo for this when it goes to the ordinance committee. And just being able to say that the commission reviewed it. I'll think about how to incorporate some of the comments that were made. I'm not sure how to deal with hoverboards in the future. I think that will be one where the ordinance will be will have to be revised. A lot of this is based on a beach management agreement that we have with Inland Fisheries and Wildlife that basically says we're going to do these certain things. And in order for the town to do some of the things that are laid out in the beach management agreement, we need an ordinance saying this is how we're going to kind of meet the stipulations of that agreement. So they haven't added hoverboards into our beach management agreement yet, so I'm not sure that I'll be adding it into this document right now.
Thank you. All right, great. Let's move to updates and go first to Marla, right? For promoting citizen stewardship. Or is it Kathleen?
So actually Kathleen's going to give our report.
Excellent, thank you. Kathleen.
So quick things. Marla's been working on an event with Dr. Beverly Johnson from Bates, who is going to give a talk at Scarborough Public Library on August 6th at 6:30 on blue carbon and the importance of salt marshes. So we'll send out information once we have a description and a link from the library, but Marla's been hard at work on that for quite a while. And we finally nailed down a date, so that was good. The other big thing that we are working on is I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but the Scarborough Leader has a lot less real estate for our agenda items. There's not much space for any articles that we might write. So Allison is putting those things in the town newsletter. If there are things you want to see, certainly let us know. But also we offered to help with providing content for social media for the town. And so if Allison asked that we look at specifically like Conservation Commission accomplishments or like goals that we want to sort of share about, and that we'd want images that are Scarborough. So if folks have ideas, we're going to create a Google Doc and we can share that with the commission so that people can just add things. And then we'll be sharing that with Allison. Certainly it seems like open space stuff would be a really good thing to put out there in various ways. So anyway, that's in the nascent stage. We'll be working on that, but I'll share that out when we develop that document. And I think that's all we have right now.
Thank you.
Can I add to that, Randy?
Of course.
That I did just notice that the town is once again doing the Summer Outdoors photo contest, which has been great to collect beautiful photos of Scarborough that the town can then use in a lot of our stuff. So that was just announced today. So hopefully we'll get more people to submit that. And there will be more information about open space plan coming. It's going to be bombarded on social media really, really soon, since we are coming up to our public engagement events and things like that. And did just want to share that just related to this is Sustainable Scarborough Day. And we have around 15 vendors signed up already for our
Nice.
event this fall. So that's something that the commission may want to think about if you want to have a table or an activity at the at Sustainable Scarborough Day this year. I think that was a couple people gave feedback that it would be nice to see the Conservation Commission have an activity or be represented at Sustainable Scarborough Day. So
That's
something
cool.
to think about.
And also, given Andrew's comments at the top, even more important for us to be out there with public messages around the why conservation and land is and preserving our natural resources here in Scarborough is a good thing for all of us. So let's move to Karen, an update on the town council, please. Thank you.
Sure. So I noticed that the South Portland Conservation Commission actually has a Facebook page. It doesn't look super active, but I noticed that. And the newspaper did change, but on a good note, me and I don't know if they reached out to Jessica Sargent, were both interviewed for an article about the land bond. So they are
Nice.
consistently at least trying to cover this stuff, which is good.
Oh, you just muted yourself.
Thank you. So for council updates, I think you saw I emailed Jamie asking for the tree protection ordinance. I met with some residents this week who I was trying to reassure them regarding a situation. And I was like, hey, this is actually something we're working on, which reminded me about it. So that's why I was bugging Jamie about it. We need 2 Jamies, maybe 3. But I wanted to mention to this commission because they almost wanted to come to the meeting tonight. They're a little worried that residents who abut the Pleasant Hill Golf Course are extremely concerned because I guess the owners have died. And it does look like the current family members who have inherited are exploring the idea of selling it. I've been told maybe they've already talked to Risbara. And so they reached out to me just to say, what can we do? And I know they've talked to Scarborough Land Trust, but I just, that's something going on in town that I thought I didn't know was happening. Apparently it's been going on. They knew about it. They thought people knew about it. I just kind of wanted to bring attention to it. And that was also something where I was like, hey, if at a minimum, if we have this tree protection ordinance in place, at least they can't clear cut the whole place and some of those old trees can stay, was kind of the reassurance I was trying to give the residents at that point. So that was why I was asking about the tree protection ordinance. And then I had emailed Jamie a copy of the Gorham Protect connector document, which is, what is it called? The Memorandum of Agreement. And this has been a hot topic for the council. We've had consistent people commenting and coming to the meetings. We actually do not have a say of what is happening, but we can have an opinion on what is happening. Council, came out in support of the Gorham connector before they came out with a route. So now we have a route, and I can tell you that there is some more mixed feelings about what this route really is and what the impact is. Jamie was so awesome. And she went and got a hold for me. This was brought to my attention that the South Portland Conservation Commission last month, or maybe even this month, issued a memo to their council in opposition to the Gorham connector, just for environmental concerns. And so the reason that I included that document with Jamie, that maybe I think I emailed to all of you, was because under it, number 5 says that to the extent practical, MTA will design the Gorham connector to avoid, minimize, mitigate impacts to the cultural and natural resources, including wetlands, the Red Brook watershed, farmlands, historical areas, structures, and wildlife corridors and habitat. And I turn to you because now council is being asked to take a position. It's a huge position to take because I'm flipping. I mean, I wasn't part of the first decision. I wasn't on council when we supported it. I can see why they supported the general idea. I think it would be helpful if the council thinks, if the commission thinks it's worthwhile to maybe revisit it and just maybe quickly touch on, look at what South Portland's concerns were, and if they feel the same way, say we feel the same way as South Portland or not. Personally, as a council, we're getting a lot of pressure from the residents from that area who are extremely upset, and Smiling Hill Farm and things like that. This is your commission. This is what you guys do, but this is something really big for us, and I thought it might be helpful to have your input from that issue.
Thank you. And what's the timing that you're working on?
So we're supposed to have we're supposed to have a workshop next month with the MTA, which would be like a presentation, hopefully public interaction. And I think after that, once we, have a public forum in Scarborough, we will be able to, I think they'll then be asking for us to come out with a position.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We could certainly add it to a future agenda for us. And the commission in late 2022 was visited by the consultants that MTA had hired around mitigation priorities. They asked us essentially in mitigation projects, what's your priority? And we essentially said we prefer land acquisition over exchange or mitigation projects, and we currently don't have priorities for land acquisition, which then snowballed into, or not snowballed, it really kicked off the whole process of asking for the council to pass a 30 by 30 resolution and get us an open space plan, both of which are in process.
Yeah.
But it's not the open space plan is not gonna be done before MTA's work, and I believe that's the last time we really discussed it as a commission. So we'll bring it back and take a look at what South Portland has done and maybe made some connections there as well. Any thoughts from folks on that? And did you have anything else to share on town council?
No, that was it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Sustainability Committee, Jamie?
Sustainability Committee hasn't met since we last met, so I don't have a new update to share for that.
Okay, great. And just a few more moments of your time, everyone. This is a big one or important one too. Parks and Conservation Land Board update from Jessica.
Yes, so as we mentioned at the top, with Andrew encouraging folks to come tomorrow to the town council meeting, will be the second reading for $800,000 spent from the land bonds for 130 acres, which is the Silverbrook Preserve 2 at 65 Hanson Road. This is really, really important. Not only because it's an amazing project, it scored the highest through the evaluation process of any parcel, but we, PCLB, have been getting more attention and questions than we ever have in the past. And so there are some concerned citizens who are concerned about spending for conservation. And so I think it's important that conservation advocates also start making their voices heard on the importance of conservation and the 30 by 30 goal specifically. So tomorrow, that $800,000 will essentially deplete the land bond. So there'll be about $13,000 left. So that's not going to really get us anywhere towards our 30 by 30 goal. So moving on, the PCLB has recommended a $6 million replenishment to the land bond on the November ballot. And that recommendation was, I don't know what we call it, recommended by the Finance Committee, approved by the Finance Committee. And so what the next step there is that there will be a workshop on the July 17th town council meeting. And Karen, tell me if I'm getting my dates mixed up now. So there'll be a workshop by Parks and Conservation Land Board at the workshop preceding the July town council meeting, because there is only one. So that's really where we need folks to come out in support of the land bond. I think that there is generally some concern that that amount is too high. And we know it won't, $6 million will not help us reach our goal. You know, it's not enough for the 30 by 30 goal. It's not going to get us there. And with the increase in land prices, you know, $6 million we feel is a very reasonable ask given where the community is today and where we need to go. But again, there's generally some concern out there that that's too high. It'll be the largest amount ever requested. So having folks who are in support of conservation come out to support the bond itself and the amount, I think is really key.
Jessica, what was that date again?
Let me double check.
The 17th, I believe. I think you're right, Jessica. And
Okay.
if it's
Thanks.
helpful, I can send you all a calendar invite also in addition to the open space workshop. So you guys can get it on your calendars.
So yes, so it's July 17th. And so we're emphasizing that it's a replenishment of the land bond for conservation. This would be the 5th land bond since 2000, the most recent being in 2019. So in support of replenishing the land bond for conservation purposes in the amount of $6 million to go to voters in November.
And
That's-
Jessica, don't we, is that at 5:30? Is that the time for that? Oh, on the
Is that,
Or
is
6
that, I
o'clock?
thought it was 6 o'clock, but
Oh, okay,
I would have to confirm that.
okay.
I can look quickly on the town calendar.
And
'Cause-
so PCLB will be making a formal recommendation presentation, but really want to make sure folks are coming out and supporting in the public comments. I don't know if there's a formal role for a conservation commission to support the amount and purposes.
Okay.
And I will say, up until this point, I think most of the feedback that town council is hearing is that it's too much, and $6 million is too much, and they're concerned about how money has been spent.
Right, so this is being grouped in with other funding concerns.
Correct.
So to the extent that anyone and we're able to be clear about what this entails, what it does not entail, what this land, where we want to buy land, where we don't want to buy land, who is able to make these requests of PCLB.
Well, and I think it's another important point too, is that it's essentially a line of credit. So
Right.
the council is authorizing that amount of money, but then they have to then authorize expenditures from that money. So there's levels of checks and balance and approvals that need to be gone through before that money is actually spent.
Right, over
Absolutely.
a period of time. Yep.
So again, the last land bond was in 2019, so it took about 5 years. And those funds aren't issued until there is an application that's recommended by PCLB and approved by town council, and then actually acquired by the applicant. So it's not as though the $6 million bond would be issued December 1st. It would only, it is issued incrementally as there are high quality projects over time. And I really like the line of credit analogy, Jamie, that
Yeah.
it's very different. It's a very different, it's a bonding authority. It's not a bond.
And a kind of a head scratcher that there's passionate opposition. So I think we just want to be aware of that and show up with our support where we can. Maggie
so-
came off mute.
Yeah,
ahead.
so thank you. So Jessica, so at our meetings, there's been a couple of people. Do we know if there's a whole lot more of that kind of dispute, or is it just a handful of people?
I would say that I have been approached by council members with questions that because they've been contacted by folks from from residents. So I don't know an exact number. I do think that conservation is very complicated in that, you know, we're talking about real estate transactions with willing sellers and, you know, lots of partners and grant applications. And so it can sometimes be difficult to explain the impact of the land bond in a, you know, in an elevator pitch, you know, one to two sentences. The amount of funds that having this bonding authority, that leverage and that match that comes into the community, and how much more we're able to accomplish by having the land bond authority. And there has been some feedback that maybe we should wait for a bond until after the open space plan is done. But as we all know,
I can say the open space plan will recommend a bond. I mean, that's already a
Yes.
strategy that
Yes.
that we've talked about with our consultants, and in our kickoff meeting with them, between them and staff, they were very impressed that we already had that mechanism in place for conservation. So we're already kind of ahead of some other communities because this has been a process that the town of Scarborough has had in place for a while.
Yeah, that is one of the things that came up, was that Scarborough was an anomaly. It was not, and it was a concern that Scarborough is an anomaly, that it has the land bonding authority, whereas we're all very proud of the leadership of Scarborough in having the land bond authority to be able to be reactive to projects, and we're able to accomplish more because of the land bond authority. So it's just, again, educating and informing folks about the value and how Scarborough is leading and how we want to encourage more of that. And that we don't need to wait for the open space plan to be done, because having the land bond replenished when the open space plan is issued in January, February, means we can hit the ground running. This gives us more opportunity to do it now rather than waiting.
Thanks. And Marla?
I think in in making a case for the land bond authority, and at that level, it might be helpful to know like a list of the projects, how much each project cost, and if possible, the matching funds, because that's a huge amount. That's in the millions of dollars. I know that has come to protect land in Scarborough, and I don't know if the Scarborough Land Trust has that information, or the town, but it might be helpful to have that. Okay, thanks.
The Scarborough Land Trust does have it for the Scarborough Land Trust. I think Parks and PCLB needs to do a little bit more due diligence and research for the other entities that have been funded through PCLB, so that we can have a full match amount, because the Scarborough Land Trust has done a fantastic job of raising match and leveraging funds.
And probably more will come out at your workshop. So
yes.
And Jamie's going to be sending us a lot of different, not a lot, but some really key meetings for us to do our very best to attend. And really great, rich discussions tonight. Thank you all for your time, and I am happy to take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Excellent.
Second.
Thank you, Pete.
Right.
Thank you all.
Jamie, have a good vacation.